We did last year, all kinds of software and hardware companies. I think what we did realize is the exponential growth in data and how to cope with it.
Okay.
That's for all of the industry.
The big data.
Among others.
Right, and the company is prepared for it?
Yes, we are. Are you?
And how about IBM? Do you have something top of mind?
Yes,
not so much for the company, but what you see.
Not for the customers, for the value of our customer. I think the most exciting was Watson. What we did this year was Watson.
Yeah.
Where I think that's the next step in what you will see happening in the next 10 years. I think.
Okay.
In the way IT can use IT.
Is there something from Accenture top of mind which you say is the key takeaway from the last 12 months?
I think that there's been a significant acceleration and adoption of cloud in the last 12 months, and it's a very different place than we were a year ago.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we have data, transition,
intelligence,
yeah, and cloud
adoption.
How's Red Hat seeing these major market developments?
I think Red Hat as an open source company is really trying to address an entire stack of change, right? So we're focusing not just on Linux, but also on the entire IT stack. One of our focus areas this year was big data and storage. We acquired a company called Gluster and are now moving into the unstructured data management space, right? So other than that, I agree, cloud is becoming something touchable, something definable. We see a lot of customers using our services in cloud environments, both private and public. So storage and cloud development, I think, for Red Hat this year was key.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically it's all evolving around a big explosion of data and bits and bytes, is that right? Could you summarize it like that?
Yes. And how to cope with it.
How to cope with it,
How to manage it.
pull the information out of it, how to pull the intelligence out of it. The next scene then for me would be the IT requirements. And talking about this, who are the guys you really talk to? I mean, there's a lot of happening around the role of the CIO, the role of the CEO. Is it all financially driven, yes or no? So, interesting to know from you guys in the same setting, to who do you really talk? To who is the guy who is delivering the IT requirements in your direction? From where is it coming? Could you say something about this? And we maybe start from the other side of this table. Can you say, is there a change? I hear it as an example that there are more developers in a business environment rather than an IT environment. Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this correct? Could you elaborate on this?
I don't think that we're seeing that, but I tell you, what we have seen is a shift in ownership for the technology budget is happening, and we see more, CMOs, for example, chief marketing officers with substantial spending authority that is growing, and it's growing at the expense of traditional IT in many cases. So I think that our buyers, people who buy services from us, they're always changing, and we've always sold into the business as well. They've been an important element of our business makeup. But seeing the CMO sort of take spend control has been a unique trend this year.
Yeah. Similar developments on IBM?
Yeah, well, also addressed by Hardy this morning is especially how the CEO perceives now technology, from number 6 to the top priority. Yeah. He sees it as a way to differentiate, but also a way how he can optimize costs, how he can get better insights. And we also align with the CMO as a more, say, a prominent role, more aligned to the CIO, putting the requirements to the CIO.
If I read the slide correctly, but please help me if I'm wrong, it said about external influences, that technology was really up on the list since 10 years. Would there be internal influences also changing in direction of technology? Or?
Well, and that's also a major, does have a major impact, because you see that a lot of the folks internally are working on maintaining the environment and not working on innovation, for example. So we think that there's a shift needed from people who are maintaining IT and people who are running IT in an innovative way to new things. And I think that's a big shift you will see happening, I think, in the next couple of years. doing things that maintaining that should be more automatic and not done by all these expensive people.
Now Dell as a company is, to who are you talking these days? If you talk enterprise environment, you came from the business side, as a sort of a direct model, evolved to an all over the place model.
Correct.
Who are your key talking people in the enterprise?
Traditionally, it's the CIO, CTO, but more and more of the CFO.
Yeah.
And what we see more and more is that the business itself are talking to Dell for solutions.
Right.
Interestingly, I read an article this morning that about 30% of all employees in the Netherlands think their IT department is lagging behind for the requests they want, bringing your own device, the new working, etc., etc., and that traditional ICT departments are still living in the 2000s and not prepared enough for the new virtual era. So we are talking more and more to the departments itself, their needs, and how we can help them fulfilling their needs.
How many percent was that?
I read in an article about 30%.
30, okay.
Is that what the trend from IT people moving to business divisions or business units or P&L responsible areas? Is this something you see happening as well?
Yeah, I absolutely. I've been at Red Hat for 7 years, so I can kind of look back and see what business we were doing 7 years ago and what we're doing today, and it's a lot around the business, a lot around the costs, a lot around improving infrastructure operations. And what we see a lot, or who we talk to a lot, are architects, chief architects, people that are designing infrastructures, that are trying to build the infrastructure of the future. So coming from a pure operational environment 4 or 5 years ago, now going more towards C-level and business types of discussions, I think is a trend for all vendors. And I also think the business is being run now by the business people versus 4 or 5 years ago, IT was running the business.
Sure,
Right.
Mr. Kinneman, yes.
And actually, to what extent do you actually talk with the architect people? Because nowadays, if indeed IT is going, the power of IT is going to the line of business people, that's a recipe for disaster. Today, it's already difficult to have a general overview of your infrastructure.
Yeah.
If everybody is waving his credit card,
Yeah.
at that point it will be completely jumbled, and that will be, as it is, a recipe for disaster in 5 years' time.
Well, I agree, but I think
I'm afraid it is.
No, I agree, but I think it's kind of it's a vicious circle. It doesn't matter which way you approach it, but ultimately, I think talking to people that actually design the infrastructure, design the business, are the right people to speak to. Yeah, and I agree when you're talking to architects, chief architects. Everybody wants to talk to them. Everybody wants a piece of the pie, right? But the question was, who are we talking to today to do our business? And it's moving from an operational discussion around the customer's chosen what he is going to do, and he's asking me to supply his demand, more to coming to us at least and asking us what do we think about where their infrastructure needs to be in the future, right? So I guess more of a trusted advisor type of role.
And another interesting development, I think, is we were at Gartner this year and last year, and when you're at the stand and you're speaking to C-level guys that come by, you ask, do you know Red Hat? A year ago, a lot of times you had to still explain who we are. This year, we heard quite often, of course we know Red Hat. So we are speaking to the right people. They see us as well. I mean, we're just at the moment we're still a small part of the wallet share in terms of the IT spendings, but we have a big impact.
Yeah. Well, maybe thank you for the bridge, which wasn't planned, because Mrs. Kroes this morning surprised me actually on her openness. Well, open, but that's how apparently she is. But the way she talked about how important open is in this transition, yes, it's easier to work together. It's easier to open up for new players. It's easier to be more cost efficient. These are things which I understand, moving to a sort of in the transition to look for open solutions. And let loose from who it's delivered. So is there a correlation between the transition and looking for proprietary solutions.
I don't think it's necessarily an issue of proprietary or not. It's an issue of scalability, right? And a lot of issues that businesses are in today are around how do I manage scalability with the choices I make today. What do they mean tomorrow?
Okay.
And that question is so difficult to answer, right? So I think, there's no one at this table that's selling services that doesn't want to position themselves with customers. But I think, we work with Dell, we work with IBM, we work with Accenture, we work with Symantec. It's about the scalability for the customer, right?
Okay.
I don't think it's...
But she says you want to have systems work together. You want to be easy to change from providers.
Yeah.
You don't want to have this lock-in, whatever it really means. But you don't want to be dependent on one guy supplying you with technology. That's how I read it. Is this something you see happening, Mr. De Vin?
Yeah, well, I think the main reason I think you'll recognize that. The main reason is I think, especially for Europe, we need to be competitive compared to the other geos. And I think we can only be competitive if we are more innovative than the other geos. Yeah. And that's the reason why she's driving that more, I think, than other geos. So we need to work together with different countries, but also I think the talent we have, I think is at the moment wasted because things are not working together. So we waste a lot of time with things which are not relevant. So maintaining the old stuff and the legacy. So I think that's the reason why she's driving this more than you see in other geos. Okay. That's our competitive advantage in I think in Europe. Innovation.
Okay.
And the talent we have.
The view from Accenture on let's say scalability rather than closed or open. What would you say on that?
Before I answer that, I want to go back to the earlier comment about the IT services and whether we're seeing a diversification, because our clients may be different than some of the ones that you guys are interacting with, but at the enterprise level, they're pretty sensitive to that. They've not allowed IT to become more distributed. Again, they've been through that. That created all kinds of governance problems. What is happening is the democratization of IT service acquisition is allowing businesses to buy IT directly. And that's changing the equation. So the acquisition of SaaS with a credit card, the acquisition with infrastructure as a credit, it becomes so easy to do it. And it creates compliance issues, it creates security problems and all types of issues. So IT as a function is now a whole new set of issues that they didn't have to deal with earlier because of that democratization. Let me answer the question about scalability.
Okay. Right.
So for us, it is for us to go to market and how we look at what we're seeing with our clients. And I think here you're talking about like diversity of suppliers and how is it that we compete in the marketplace. We've been living in this world for a long time. There isn't a client that I go to that every major supplier doesn't have some type of relationship or presence there. The savvy clients have created preferred supplier relationships, and they've got a bit more handle among their procurement and others. I believe that this the open source pieces make that an interesting challenge for us to work in because it's less possible for us to differentiate ourselves than it has been in the past. We don't have a proprietary asset or tool. Our products are much more interoperable. In theory, it's easier to swap us out, right? So, for us, for Accenture, what's important is that we focus on delivering client value. And what's always been our recipe for success is doing good work. So, as long as we continue to focus on making our clients successful, we believe that we're continuing to be successful in the market. So we don't try to get too caught up in we're going to lose the differentiation, it's a lot easier to swap us out and that type of thing. We really try to focus on making sure that we're delivering the client value at the end of the day. We think that that's what makes us successful in the marketplace above anything else.
Okay. If looking at let's say companies like large companies, and IBM's position on open source, I think we should just address this as it's not that you are a new player to this open source arena. As I heard this morning, it's been around for several, maybe 10 years. But taking a bit step back, you are sort of joining a development because of a reason? I think. Can you maybe explain how this evolution was?
The main reason why we started 11 years ago, because we saw that the pace of technology, which we should not underestimate, you cannot do that if things not working together. And IBM can never grow if you cannot work with other systems, because integration is key here. So I think a turning point in our strategy, and it's still one of our 3 strategic focus areas, is open standards and open source. It was starting with an investment of 1 billion 11 years ago, a lot of money, even for IBM 11 years ago. So Lou Gerson started that initiative. And I think since that time we already did, 15,000 open source engagements with clients already. So I think we are experienced. We are a senior partner in open source, working closely with Red Hat, with Novell. We still have, I think, around 600 developers full-time working on projects. A lot more initiatives you will see next year in announcements we will do. Our stack, system stack is completely open source enabled. I think 600 products of our software portfolio are open source enabled, so we are an open source company, even you could say. And we have our global services unit, we have a special dedicated open source unit, so
I'm having trouble with that.
Well, name a system which is not working on Linux. Name a system which is not working on Linux. We have them all.
Fair.
So that's fair.
Well, one of the elements of an open source company is that they're working with communities. The community members they bring intelligence in one certain way into a project, and then the business model behind it is far more than that sort of a subscription model than a licensing model. Do you see that already happening, or you're in the process?
Yeah, I think so far we gave away a significant piece of our code to the open source, and an example was Eclipse, but there are many other examples. So that's giveaway, and in return you get a different business model. I think that's also the future. So I think we are. I think the number 4 largest contributor to open source so far. I think so. We did our fair share. I think comparing with the others.
Yes, but IBM, of course, also was mentioned this morning as being one of the main legacy platforms with AIX. Is there still a future for that, or you're letting that die out?
Well, we have history, so that was the picture. So that's history. So
it coexists for a long time to come.
How IT started, so it's an evolution. Look to other industries like automobile, how it started and how it's evolved. So that's just evolution, and that's how we drive. And I think we will be more and more to open source and community-driven developments.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. De Thin. What made you land those 15,000 projects? And the reason I'm asking is because we are discussing open source in Amsterdam government for a long time. The first report that was written by IBM stating that open source was too expensive. And the IT department of the city of Amsterdam then decided to go to the old way and go for Microsoft Office all the way until now.
I'm not aware of that statement, but I cannot comment on this statement.
You can check this out. What made you land those projects? Was that TCO? Was that ease of use? Was that reliability? What was it?
I don't know this specific project, so I cannot comment on a project like that. I don't know.
No. Those 15,000 open source projects you mentioned. What were the main reasons to land those?
Well, different. In most cases, it's of course TCO is the main driver in this kind of projects, but also reducing complexity.
Okay.
And I see it more and more that the complexity of current IT. Well, you can make a big step forward in reducing the complexity by using open source components.
Yeah, right. Complexity and TCO speaking. One company in Accenture did a research, Freedom of Information Act research in the Dutch ministry. And what came out was that storage costs differ enormously between the ministries. It goes from 674 euros per terabyte up to 23,333 euros and 19 cents. How will, for example, Red Hat's integrated storage contribute to lowering those TCOs? How will open source storage or the open source environment lower those costs?
Well, not only open source, but also virtualization. I think,
exactly.
Especially in that perspective, look to our offerings here. We have what we call a virtualized storage solutions (SVC), where we offer the customer you can attach any vendor on this solution. So that's what we're offering. That's also an example how we're trying to open the market and give and provide customers a solution and not a lock-in.
Right.
So I think we are one of the few who have a solution like that. So
Maybe you name it OpenKVO.
And OpenK is of course where we contribute significantly. Almost except for one platform, it's enabled on IBM systems. So I cannot comment on the last one, which will be open, but yet. But we're working with Red Hat at full speed. But I think, especially on storage, I think what we how we contribute is with our virtualization solution here.
Right.
And I think we have many reference cases in the world. One of the largest is actually in Holland, running an open environment where they attach storage, the disk where they can buy it the cheapest. They attach to our solution.
Commodity hardware it is.
Well, in some areas it is.
Right.
Sometimes it's not.
Okay.
Because it differs on your service level agreements you want to achieve.
Okay.
So you can always use commodity.
Thank you very much. Are there any further questions on this scalability?
Not on this subject, but now you are talking. I read in an interview yesterday on, I think it was Executive Channel.
Executive people.
Yeah, executive people. That you mentioned the mainframe as state of the art today. Yes. Okay. And you mentioned security because in mainframe everything is put off and you have to put it on.
Yeah, it's a different architecture.
And will let's say, for example, that security, in your opinion, is a weaker point of open source?
No, that was not the intention to.
No.
That was my intention.
On the contrary.
That was definitely not my intention. Because I think we have great references where mission critical systems are running actually on open source Linux. Credit card transactions, many bank transactions are running on Linux. That's definitely I don't want to say. Now it was just a difference between the architectures, and I think mainframe by design. The architecture the security was one of the top priorities in the design of a mainframe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's on chip level. It starts with cryptographic functionality. So that was my intention to say. And in other architectures, it started with an open mind, and with the mainframe was started with a closed mind, and then started to make things open, which I think is a different approach, which makes sense, especially nowadays.
Okay, thank you.
But let's continue this subject of security. Yes.
I work extensively with Z Enterprise. It's just part of the fabric of our business, and for many of our clients, it's at the heart of their enterprises. They run their mission-critical systems on it, and IBM has done the right thing and invested in Z Enterprise to continue the platform. I think it was $3 billion was the most recent investment to release the Z Enterprise. And it's state-of-the-art technology. But what they've done is the right thing. They've incorporated pieces inside of the architecture so you can do things like IFL and have Linux running on the platform alongside their legacy ZOS. And I think it's that bridge that IBM has put into their hardware that is going to allow people to gradually transition and migrate into more open architectures over time. We believe that for some of our clients, they're never going to move off of the mainframes. And I think that will be true for many of them. They're too invested in it, and it's too much at the core of their enterprise. But for other clients that will gradually move, IBM's invested and put the right architecture inside of the Z Enterprise hardware to allow them to do that gradually over time and in a safe way that addresses security and all the other aspects that people expect, reliability and otherwise.
Let's just continue the subject of security, as I believe this is a key issue for most of the people moving to clouds and organizing big data. There's too many times people say, well, let me just stick to my server outfit in the office rather than moving away to data centers, clouds, virtualized, whatever. First of all, is this a mental issue or is this a technical issue? Is this just something people are to give their critical data away to something they don't see, physically don't see?
Well, I think it's both. Sometimes the technical barriers, which we addressed also this morning, but also, of course, it's a cultural. I think it's also an evolution between the years. That you give away IT, which was the kingdom in many companies, and how proud they are on the machine they bought. They would
Yeah.
well, that's gone. And
Yeah.
IT is like energy in the future.
It is such a complex question. I don't think you can answer it very easily. I mean, you have implications of regulatory challenges that inhibit adoption of things like cloud, where there's certain data that can't cross national borders. You have issues so that transcends even security, although maybe even bundled into the same complex problem there. The way that Accenture has started to see our clients do this is that they've broken their data, and I think IBM uses some similar terms, into kind of systems of engagement and systems of record. And we think that that's the right way to look at it. You keep your master data under lock and key inside your data center for the time being, but the systems of engagement, the things that your customers are interacting with, the portals, the websites, the stuff they're buying things from, the customer service interactions, those types of things, those are fine to be cloud-based solutions. The data is fleeting and it's not your system of occasions. Over time, they'll become more comfortable with it. And when I'm talking about cloud there, I'm talking public cloud, not private cloud, obviously. But I think if you keep that paradigm in mind, and IBM uses similar terms as well, it's a good way to look at it. And people will become more adoptive of it. We're seeing that happen now.
Cybercrime, it has been, sorry, Mr.
I was about to ask you, isn't it simply a matter of once again, a technology or a solution or delivery method kind of trying to run before it has started to crawl? Because simply, if you take into account the fact that cloud problems with regard to standards, interaction and interoperability between services, cloud services, the problem indeed with governance, compliance, even for instance in lots of countries the problem is who actually owns the data in the cloud. That isn't quite clear yet, meaning all companies going for a cloud except for a private cloud are kind of running almost like lemmings, eyes closed, into the river.
Yeah, one of the things that we see as a way to address that is the emergence of cloud brokers that are going to exist that sit between the cloud providers and the buyers,
rather than one less.
that are responsible for addressing the complexity of that, so that it's presented to our clients and our customers as an easier to consume thing, because it is a very complex thing to do, and for each business to have to navigate all of those complexities is a really difficult thing. And we believe that the cloud broker allows you to do that and not become too tied to a particular provider, so that you can actually achieve that portability and service that you want over time. It's not an easy transition. You've made a very good point about, have we tried to run before we can walk? And I think that in some cases, that's probably accurate. There's some services out there that are not ready for prime time, that I believe have attempted to be adopted, and it's created some real challenges. But there's a lot of things that are underway that will address that and make it a better place to be.
But if I get it right, the solution is simply adding yet another layer of complexity. Come again, and cost.
But then you have to lock in only with that layer and not with all the other layers.
Put that in, you don't have to worry about what's behind it, because you've abstracted the other pieces of it away.
Yeah, but the point is actually, I've been reading about indeed going to the cloud, and meaning that most companies underestimate the cost remaining inside the company with regard to follow-up and indeed checking on, and indeed actually outsourcing, hidden costs, etc. I just read an interesting CompuWare study with regard to hidden costs of outsourcing mainframes, for instance. Mm-hmm. And if you look at that and if you read that, and presumably in solid information, once again kind of scratching your head, and it's kind of this is kind of masochistic exercise.
Couldn't you say that the cloud is a form of very well managed virtualization?
Also, but I think to add to your point, or in general, we talk to businesses that outsource and then insource, because while they're outsourcing, they're looking for cost optimization, get into risk situations, and then do risk mitigation, bring the IT back in. It's an ever-evolving process, and I think cloud is just a new ecosystem of business, right? And the choices will be made, and I think there's a lot of hype around cloud, and I think that hype will at some point go away, or it will become a standard. And today, businesses do not see cloud yet as a standard means of doing their IT business, right? They don't. They choose it because they have to. We're all people, we have to make choices, right? We manage costs. At some point, someone has to decide what he does. And some go for a cloud solution, take risks into account around data, around security, around laws. There's discrepancy every day in IT. One company would do A and another B, and they would not agree, right? What is the right choice to make? So if you're running a business and you have 100 million in IT spend and you need to increase productivity and decrease cost, you make choices. And I think one of the issues around that is, or what Red Hat is trying to address, is to make sure that the choices that are being made are long lasting, make sense in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years. I think a lot of the businesses today going into cloud, looking at SaaS and PaaS and outsourcing IT, they're doing it because it's a quick way to save money. Right? It's a quick way to make.
It looks like a quick way to save.
No, or at least,
I actually disagree. I disagree, and I think that was the point you were making is, the value case that's actually created out of this, although it looks appealing up front, when you peel back the onion from this thing and you realize that, these things are all unbundled, and when I have to put these things all together, the cost of this is not really as appealing anymore. That was the point I was trying to make this morning about just migrating to cloud is usually not enough. There has to be some business value in it as well. Mm-hmm. What is it that you're adding? Are you adding the flexibility that didn't exist before, perhaps to expand for seasonal demand that you wouldn't require to have that kind of infrastructure on premise? Are you adding a new business capability that allows you to take advantage of elasticity and finish computations faster that give you some type of advantage? Are you monetizing IoT in some part where you're maybe creating one of your applications and making them multi-tenant so that you can actually sell them, not just use them internally, but sell them? Those are the things that I think allow people to create a real business case around moving applications and business systems in the cloud. If you look at it just as a pure lift and shift to move things to cloud, the business case is not very good in many cases. For some clients it is, depending on what their cost structures are, but the business case a lot of times is not. It has to be more than that. There has to be some value delivered.
In the transition to new economic models, one aspect is evolving is with performance-based collaboration type of thing, which is young. But do you see opportunity to get a clean cut between responsibility and cost creating and take responsibility?
Share the risks, share the profits.
You actually contractually?
Well, if you
we've been doing that for years.
Performance-based is like together with your clients, you define performance expectation.
We go a step further. So we oftentimes will strike agreements which are actually gain share arrangements. Right. So we won't get paid or we only get paid a partial sum, unless they contract it. But I'll be honest with you about this, and I see my colleague from ABN AMRO laughing, probably because one of our Accenture folks has talked to him about this. If I had a nickel for every time I talked to clients about a gain share arrangement, I'd be a rich man.
Right.
The number of times that we discuss this and the number of times we actually strike it in agreement is two very different things. Okay. We've done them, we just don't do them very, very often. And I actually think it's because it dawns on our clients over time as, wait a second, this actually could be really beneficial. And what happens, what are all the upside risks that are associated with it? It becomes very complex, you get under it. So it sounds appealing on the surface, the implementation of it is really hard.
Sure. And on the high aggregated levels, it's going to be more complicated.
I think there's going to be more of them, though. I really do. I think you're onto something there. I think there is going to be more of them. I mean, we're seeing more of our application management agreements. They will include more than just your mess for less. Mm-hmm. They want a better place at the end. Mm-hmm. They want you to rationalize their applications. They want to move things onto Linux as part of the outsourcing. So don't just maintain it, make it a better thing at the end of the day. That's what we're seeing a lot more of.
I mean, another way of looking at it is, okay, all of these enterprises are cost cutting. Well, that's a serious economic development. You could also question, has IT been too expensive? Has IT been too experimental? Interesting to hear your views on this.
I've talked a lot. Let these guys talk. I
think it depends, but I think if you keep running IT as it is today, it will be too expensive. Nobody can afford, especially with the growth figures projected. Look to the storage figures. If you keep doing it as you do it today, it will be too expensive, and you can go bankrupt even. So I think you need to do things differently. And I think one of the examples with our later announcement is our flex systems, where we put intelligence on top of the stack. Where you say, well, all the things will be automatically installation, your management task. It will be done by an intelligent way, and we copied a lot of the stuff out of Watson into this kind of solution. So you see our pure system family just announced. I think that's a way where you can reduce costs significant and put the savings to innovation and put the people to the other projects. I think that's the way we will go with the IT.
I agree with that. For instance, nowadays you have storage managers managing the storage area, and they will evolve into data managers, and hopefully later on in information managers, because in the end it's all about information, not about the storage. Mm-hmm. So the layer below it will more and more be automized and managed directly by some other parties, while the internal IT department is more about the business and about the IT itself.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm.
So I'll add something to that.
Yeah, sure, thanks.
We have seen a renaissance of the expectation around innovation for IT. And I think that it comes from, there's only so much water that you can squeeze out of a rock over time. The costs, we're at the end of the line in terms of cost cutting. There's some additional things that can be done. But if corporate IT departments aren't thinking about how they bring value back to the business, they're going to be dinosaurs really quickly. So figure out a way to bring innovation to the business and to talk to them about competitive differentiation that they can offer through innovative technology. Figure out a way that they can monetize IT services they've been offering. I love the story of Amazon. So Amazon, great retailer, right? And I think it was 2007, and these guys in South Africa said, I'm really good at this IT stuff. Maybe we could sell it. Mm-hmm. And now we have AWS. And I think that not every organization can adopt or embrace something like that, but IT needs to be thinking about them being a value creator to the business and not a cost center.
There seems to be like a contradiction, because on the one hand, it was said buying power and buying decision power goes to the marketing people, etc., on the one hand, and now you're saying on the other hand, marketing department, IT department should be leaning back and trying to bring and offer and almost sell their services. If they are kind of losing the services all over the place, one, what will they be selling yet? Secondly, what will be the overview and overall infrastructure?
I think they're complementary. I really do. I think that they coexist with each other.
In the best of worlds, they're probably complementary, but IT will be pulling its side of the sheet, and obviously all the rest of the company will put in all their own little pieces of the sheet, and so probably you will be finding out that you will be having 3 or 4 divisions having contracts with Salesforce, etc., and empty. And on the other hand, still having a large mainframe somewhere, because obviously that's a core business. I'm scratching my head, and this once again seems to be not really apt to improve and optimize things. Mm-hmm. So if I sound kind of skeptical.
So just to add bits from my chair as a customer.
One of the suffering customers.
A centralized bank. Curbing helps a lot. Just like 10 years ago, we had the first revolution. We had the EUC, where everybody.
What's curbing?
Melport. Keeping it small, keeping it in
governance, governance and managing the
and really making sure it doesn't go beyond its boundaries.
Wielding a big stick.
Maybe, yeah. In EUC computing was similar. You could do a lot with that, a lot quicker than you could do in your big mainframe or client server systems. But as soon as they needed interfaces, they needed one single golden truth of data, and wherever they were always beaten by the IT guys. So you just position them, well, for your first prototype, this kind of stuff, but if it becomes successful, if this is really what the business needs, we have to move it in phases to the big IT. With cloud, in our company we're doing exactly the same. They're very good for experiments. They're very good for sales like of stuff with short time to market. In rare cases also pays, but not often. But they're not allowed to make interface with internal systems, or hardly. Because once you start building that, you lose your time to market advantage, you lose your cost advantage or whatever. If they've proven successful, usually after about 2 years, we say, okay, now it's time to integrate it more and slowly move it to either a very stable IT managed cloud solution or something which becomes moving to the internal private cloud.
And you've already gone through that exercise successfully?
Yeah.
And
well,
the others weren't kicking and screaming? And
well, the end users, of course, keep on complaining, why can't we have both? Why can't we have the SaaS cloud solution and single sign-on to your internal network and this and this? And it takes some time explaining to them that it's really not possible to combine those two.
And they accepted?
Yes, in the end they have to accept it.
They have to.
Yeah, but also if you show them the details, if you show them why the internal IT is so complex and costly, in the end they understand. Also because often it's so complex because they didn't want off-the-shelf standard components, they wanted all tailored, specialized, etc.
Yeah.
That discussion starts again and again.
I would like to raise one more thing, which is mobility. The world is real time, all the time, every time. It's constant dialogue, and it's going to be worse in that respect. Easier for consumers, but for guys who control IT and security and cybercrime, that must be a real challenge. So I'm really interested in what you advise your clients in enterprise spaces, how to deal with this. Real time, all the time, with mobile devices, smartphones, you name it. It won't be long till we have IT devices in glasses. It's happening and it will be happening. So how do you, as vendors, talk to enterprises to deal with this? What do you have a program, steps, cautiousness, or?
Yes, we from Dell have an idea about it. In the old ways, you always had a storage manager, a server manager, a printer manager, a networking manager, all sitting as a king on top of their empire, deciding what will happen within their specific part of the IT department. This is the old way of thinking of running an IT, and it's no longer possible. When you look at all the new devices they are currently on the market and which will come on the market within 1 or 2 or 3 years, which I don't know which one are existing right now, and you want to implement it in your current IT situation, environment, infrastructure, it's no longer possible. If you want to add something into your infrastructure right now, it takes a very long time to test it, etc., etc. And before you know it, you're 3 or 6 months further down the road before you can implement it, and your colleagues from other companies are much faster and get ahead of you. So what you need to do is try to get rid of your fixed old infrastructure and go to a more virtual world, not only on servers, but also on networking and on storage. Easier methods of management, not 100 different kinds of tools, but maybe 1 or 2 or 3 tools to manage all your virtual assets, and where you can add new functionality or new applications very fast within a week and add more value to your internal and external customers.
So virtualization, basically.
Yeah. On all levels.
So I'd like to comment that when we talk about security with our customers, I think cybercrime, as long as you're going to have some type of virtual application, e-commerce, any kind of business that's done where there are 2 ends to access, there's going to be crime, right? It's not stoppable. So one of the things that we're also dealing with is quickly identifying issues and actually working on them, because you cannot prevent. As creative as the people are to try to prevent it, just as creative are the people that try to breach it. So a lot of it is around identifying security breaches, fixing security breaches very quickly, and dealing with the consequences fast and efficiently is one of the measures, at least we believe, that will help. Because there's no way to stop it. Right? I don't think there is.
So you're fast, you have to go identify, react, and then see how to fix it or how to even
Well, one of the things with
chase
open
it?
source is because the source code is open. I mean, it's the security approach is collaborative, so this really helps us, right? As soon as somebody's trying to break something, someone else is trying to fix it. So we have a lot more insight, at least in Linux and in our technology, on where the problems are. We have people working on, producing problems and fixing problems. But yeah, I think dealing with an issue efficiently is just as valuable as trying to stop it.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. De Veen?
No, I think of course, it's first is awareness. I think especially the awareness, and it's raising now. You see it in the CEO study. It's now raising to the sixth, but I think it will be number 1 or 2 soon. But I think one of the real developments which can help cybercrime is real-time analytics. There's a lot of focus on our company. You see it in the acquisitions. You see the offerings we are putting in the market are around real-time analytics. And here again, I think open standards will help definitely, because now you see a lot of customers, they have the transaction, they move the data to another environment, do the batch transaction, hopefully within 24 hours, and then they will notify a particular event which is which could be a crime. But I think you need to do it on the transaction, and you need also here again technology, open standards for this. I think there's significant focus in IBM on what we're doing here. And I think Cognos is one of our acquisitions which help here. And again, old mainframe is, I think, again helping here, because I think it's a platform where you can do the transaction and the analytics in one run, because you have the capability and the scalability for that. And you see, and I think facts are not lying. We sold 155 new Z clients in the last 6 quarters. New clients adopting the technology, the old mainframe. And especially one of the drivers is real-time analytics here.
That's 155 new set.
The last 6 quarters.
Where?
6 quarters.
Not in Amsterdam.
50% is in the growth countries.
1.5 years.
And 50% is in the major countries. And they're all 50-50 shared with large enterprises and high, small, medium business. Especially startups start with mainframe from scratch.
You have this somewhere on paper and on document, this information?
Yeah, no, it's public, it's open.
Because I've been asking IBM time and time again to tell us when they need new and are greenfield companies among them. I mean,
also
not previous.
155.
I've been asking this information for ages, never got it. Thank you.
Well, we've seen it, right? I've seen it. It's out there. I'll get it. Can I make a comment on mobility?
Please.
So, mobility is one of our fastest growing segments of Accenture's business, and I think that we've only just begun to see what was going to happen in mobility, and we probably can't even imagine how much it's going to change. The augmented reality that I spoke about briefly this morning offers new possibilities for safety, for delivery. The autonomous driving of cars to do delivery services, pizza or whatever, it's going to change so many things that we can't even think about today. One of the things that we're seeing as an immediate impact is this always-on, consumer mobility, mobile access. There's so many more users of services than there ever have been in the past. The back-end systems of our clients' IT departments, they're taxed heavily because of it. One of the things that Accenture's been doing a lot of work around is how do we take and untax those systems? So take a mainframe, for example, that's stressed because all of a sudden, because of new channels, they have 5 times the transactions that they ever had in the past. We've seen this like with insurance quoting and other things that it's become so much easier to shop things around. And putting things like data acceleration layers and thinking about an architecture which is going to offload this inquiry, this rush of mobile transactions to insulate your back-end processing that you need to do to run your core enterprise, that is an important step that our clients are having to take in order to protect their business operations. That's just one dimension of the changes that I think that we can expect to see. We've only just begun. Google, we're getting a pair of Google Glass, I think in January.
Really? Okay.
And we have big plans for that. Big plans. There's a client here in the Netherlands that we're going to be doing some work with almost right away.
Can you release names?
No.
And basically, on cybercrime issues, what do you really tell them? What do you advise them how to tackle this?
The best defense is a good offense. It is. It's inevitable. And the best thing that you can do is to make sure that you detect and you can respond very quickly. You know, predictive analytics, I think, offers a new realm of ability to protect your enterprise and block.
And is there already a live case or experimental phase where you use augmented reality to deal with cybercrime?
Augmented reality to deal with cybercrime?
Or to make it easier, or to predict more, or follow faster?
So, I don't think it's, no, I don't think we're really doing anything with that. We are doing some things with augmented reality in crime, but it has to do with closed circuit television and trying to do biometric matching, large scale matching, that type of thing of crime databases, but that's a very different matter.
Can you indicate what cybercrime will cost community and how it will raise the TCO of systems?
That's not my field of expertise.
Okay.
Ask university guys.
Mr. Dennis, you had a question, sorry.
Actually, with regard to defense, best defense is offense. To an extent, is it much more a matter of having a differentiated defense, to the extent that perhaps you should be saying this data is truly important, we will protect it, and the data on whatever mobile system you bring in, too bad, it's up to you to protect your own data, etc. And isn't so much more, rather than trying to defend everything, is it a matter of select what you want to defend?
I think you're walling off pieces of it. Yeah, I do. I mean, it's like what I was talking about with systems of record.
The point is it doable? Because they are open systems, and at that point it becomes a matter, is it doable to do that?
You know, it's a paradox, right? I was just mentioning this to my colleague here next to me with open source and security, right? Because we all want to be good contributors to open source, but the reality is that providing the actual source code may very well be the Achilles heel that we expose of how to circumvent security measures. So it's a dilemma, and it's a bit of a paradox, because we're very much fans and supporters of open source, but it's actually something that Accenture struggled with. We're not a software company, we're not a hardware company, we're an integrator. We have some software products. We've actually considered open sourcing a few. And our dilemma is, what's our liability of doing that? What if somebody finds a security hole in it and then takes advantage of that security hole for a client where we've already installed the software? There's some really complex issues to be dealt with there. And it creates some challenges for us, for sure.
That's security by obscurity, and that doesn't work. That's what the people of open source always say. Show it and you'll be safer.
I'm sorry.
I mean, that what you're saying is you're doing it security by obscurity, by not pointing, or at least allowing the code to be reviewed, and that's what the open source people say.
I think it's a paradox. I do. I really do.
I don't disagree with you, but Linux and SE Linux, as an example, are managed in a closed environment, right? So you always got to balance off what you see and what you do with what you see, right? So, I mean, if you put on a scale how many security breaches there are in Linux versus Windows, right? It's like 10,000 to 1. So Linux, there's something good happening with Linux.
Any other further questions? Important questions, key issues, top of mind things. You need to know stuff, because we have to close down in 5 to 10 minutes.
How do you persuade governments to use open source? How do you persuade governments to use
They're the
open
easiest
source?
ones to persuade. I'm just honest to God truth. They're the biggest adopters of open source that we have.
More questions?
Actually, getting back to big data, because that was one of the big topics, was kind of scratching my head, because once again it's kind of running before you can crawl or walk, because the signal to noise ratio will be probably lousy and getting lousier to begin with, if indeed the data sets are becoming bigger. And also, to a large extent, I do remember the good old days of the data warehouse and the data mining, and it came, and to an extent it went, because it actually didn't really pan out, it didn't really work out. So now I'm hearing all about big data, and this will be kind of the second coming of Christ with regard to data analysis, and I'm kind of wondering to what extent I will be hearing in 2 years' time, oh yeah, good idea, but ultimately we really didn't get the value out of it. So to what extent is this kind of data warehousing squared all over again? Sorry? if I remember things of the good old days.
The challenge, I think, and I hope we have proven that with the Watson, that is the way how you get intelligence out of data, big data.
Excuse me, the problem is I just spoke with somebody from the development team of Watson, and indeed, one of the points I asked was indeed signal to ratio, signal to noise, and indeed, his answer was, Watson, if there's an answer in the data set, it will find the answer. But it's not so much as about finding new developments and new things.
With a probability, but he finds an answer with a probability. But it's a different technology how you get information out of the data. Because you say, well, 80% of the data is unsecure. You don't know how is the data. Is that the answer to your question?
The problem to an extent is if you have lots of data, you don't have necessary information, let alone that you're capable of acting upon the information. You've got to do the real sensible thing, as was the problem with the data warehousing and data mining. But fast forward, I hear people talking about big data, and obviously there are advantages into it, but if I put myself in the position of a customer, I could be scratching my head and say, now, talk to me about value rendered in 2, 3, 5 years' time. Because otherwise, why would I be keeping a humongous amount of data? Also, it was mentioned, finding the right technology to go about it. I seem to recall having heard somebody say this morning it's not one size fits all, and how to figure out the right technology for the right application. Sorry, once again, running before you can crawl. Sorry to sound skeptical again.
There's a degree of maturity in that. One of the things that we've seen with big data that I think is becoming more pervasive now is a recognition that it's different. It's not relational technology. It's not rows and columns analysis anymore. It's trying to make sense of disparate collections of data that aren't necessarily correlated in ways that we've thought about previously. And the way that successful clients are doing this is actually creating a discipline around the context of a data scientist in the organization who is more of a mathematician than they are an IT technician. And I think that if we try to do big data the same way that we did data warehousing, we will get the result that we had with data warehousing, which is missed expectations. Big data is a different model, is a different way of appreciating and driving information out of the data that requires a very specialized expertise. And these data scientists, which we're trying to mint, and it's not easy, these data scientists are at the core of making that successful.
I did read the Harvard Business article about the sexiest job of the 21st century, and unfortunately it also kind of indicated that you simply can't find them because they're quite new birds. And
they're new birds. It's very hard to grow them too.
If you need them and you can't find them,
it's almost you
just get them from India, China.
No, come on, be real.
No, this is a very difficult problem because for us, what we found makes a good scientist are the people that have usually an advanced physics or a math degree, because a lot of the algorithms that are used to analyze this data are extremely advanced in terms of how data is studied. So the world of SQL and looking at rows and columns and doing joins and things like that, it just doesn't work in this world. And it requires a different breed of individual who can think about that. And it's hard to grow them. There are not many of them.
I don't want to sound too skeptical and negative, but if you look at the financial world, we had the quants, people creating the financial models, and we see today what actually, in what kind of mess it covers. The point is, the point is, if you look at what
no, really, what do you think about the financial crisis?
But the point is, if big data quite often is being pushed in the world of social media, etc., etc. With all due respect, the data you get there is not so much financial or mathematically representable. To an extent, it's also sociological, psychological, etc. And if you kind of tell me that you're looking for data scientists out of the physics and mathematics world, obviously for the algorithms I can understand this, but trying to figure out and get the information you need to do some sensible work on it for information in the social media, or perhaps smart world, smart things, etc., smart meters, etc.,
Yeah,
smart
smart
grids.
meters, yeah.
Once again, I absolutely believe in it, but show me how it can be done, because if I put myself in the position of a customer, I could be scratching my head and say, nice words, nice marketing, nice article in a publication, but show me.
So
Sorry.
I think the marketing hype of that, what is the sort of the valley of despair that comes after that? Is that right? It's strong. There's a great story about Google training their systems to go and watch YouTube, and you know they had a bunch of computers go and watch every video in YouTube, and the unfortunate outcome was the only thing that seemed to learn was how to recognize a cat at the end of it. But you know, this field is expanding rapidly. I think what IBM is doing with Watson and other areas is going to change and have a big impact on our industry. And so this concept of machine learning is going to become, you know, and it's very, what is it, Terminator-ish, right?
Thank you very much. Mr. Vin, do you have one thing top of mind so we can sit down in 12 months' time to say yes? It
I
was
want
right.
to say the application of Watson, but I think especially, and I think that's what our customer needs today, the next couple of months, is reducing the complexity. I think that's the theme of the next couple of months, and I think our customers need a reduction in complexity,
Right.
especially nowadays.
Herbert?
Second that, and together with ease of management.
Ease of management, right? Nice, nice. These things I can understand.
Yeah,
What
so
are your top of mind thing? Where are we going to be here?
I think in 12 months we're going to be more focused on interoperability, flexibility. You know what open source is about: freedom of choice. It's about flexibility. So that's where I think we're going in 12 months. We want to make sure the industry has more choice for what they do.
All right. It's done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks again, and we'll see you in 12 months' time to follow up, right? Thank you very much. Are you at this moment?